The silence that fell over Kingsley's, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, was so thick it seemed to have weight. Conversation ceased. Cutlery froze midair. Dozens of curious eyes turned toward the small open space between the tables. 10-year-old Lucas Montgomery was shaking. His legs, strapped into metal braces, trembled as he extended a small hand toward Diana Johnson, the restaurant's only black waitress. A soft piano melody floated through the air, and the boy's sudden impulse to ask someone to dance had escaped before reason could stop him. "Sir, control your son," manager Mr. Thornton snapped, his voice slicing through the silence. "That's inappropriate. This is not a dance hall, and our employees are not here to entertain children." At a corner table, Richard Montgomery, billionaire investor and one of the most powerful men in the country, clenched his jaw. It was the first time he had taken his son out in public since the car accident that had partially paralyzed the boy 2 years ago, a mistake he now regretted. "Lucas, sit down," Richard said quietly but firmly. The little boy's hand faltered, hovering awkwardly in the air. Diana's gaze shifted between the boy, his father, and the manager. In her 5 years working there, she had learned to become invisible. She knew the tone, the looks, the unspoken hierarchy. People like her weren't meant to stand out. Then, slowly, she untied her apron and placed it neatly on the tray. "Mr. Thornton," she said calmly, "my shift is over." Before anyone could react, she turned to Lucas and smiled gently. "I can't dance in an apron." Gasps echoed across the room. Richard stood abruptly. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm accepting an invitation," Diana replied evenly. And then, to the shock of everyone watching, she took Lucas's trembling hand. The piano melody continued, delicate and slow. Lucas took a hesitant step forward. The metal of his braces screeched faintly, but Diana didn't hurry him. She matched his rhythm, slow, imperfect, yet full of dignity. Whispers rippled through the tables. "She's getting fired tomorrow," a woman murmured. Richard's chest tightened. For a split second, an old memory pierced through the polished armor of his composure. His late wife Elizabeth twirling Lucas in their living room, laughter echoing as she whispered, "It's not about perfection. It's about connection." He hadn't heard that word, connection, in a long time. When the short dance ended, Diana led Lucas back to his table and smiled as if speaking to a grown man. "Thank you for asking me out," she said softly. "It was an honor." She turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "Wait, what's your name?" "Diana Johnson, sir." He repeated it quietly, as if engraving it into memory. Then he handed her his business card. "My office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The restaurant held its breath. Diana took the card without flinching, her hands trembling only slightly. "Dad," Lucas asked as she walked away, "why did you do that?" Richard didn't answer. For the first time, he looked at his son, not as an obligation, not as a broken extension of his legacy, but as someone with his own quiet courage. Dinner continued in strained silence. The next morning, the glass towers of Montgomery Investments reflected the rising sun. Diana stood in the marble lobby, wearing her best navy blue skirt and white blouse. People in designer suits brushed past her without a glance. "Diana Johnson to see Mr. Montgomery," she told the receptionist, who gave her a long, skeptical look before calling upstairs. 18th floor. "Miss Winters will meet you." In the elevator, Diana clutched her purse tightly, breathing steadily. Fear didn't touch her anymore. Life had tested her too many times for that. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted by Miss Winters, a sharply dressed woman with an assessing gaze. "Mr. Montgomery is in a conference call. Follow me." As they walked past mirrored walls, Diana felt eyes on her. A black woman walking through executive corridors was spectacle enough. Winters glanced at her sideways. "He had you fired, didn't he?" she asked suddenly. "It happens. Powerful men call, and people like you lose their jobs." "People like me?" Diana asked quietly. "You know what I mean. Employees who don't know their place." Diana smiled slightly. "And where exactly would that be?" Winters didn't reply. Her phone rang. "He'll see you now." Richard Montgomery's office dominated half the floor. with glass walls overlooking Manhattan's skyline. He stood near the window, arms crossed, looking every bit the self-made mogul the world knew him to be. "Mr. Montgomery," Diana greeted, composed but firm. "Miss Johnson." He gestured to a chair. "Please." A long silence followed. Richard was a man used to controlling rooms with quiet, but Diana didn't fill the silence. She met it. "Do you have a background?" he finally asked. "Excuse me." "Education." "College." "Bachelor's in Child Development from NYU," she said. "Incomplete master's in special education." He raised an eyebrow. "And you work as a waitress?" "I work 3 jobs," Diana replied calmly. "The restaurant, a bookstore, and as a private tutor." Richard studied her, then opened a folder on his desk. Inside were photos of a community center and children in wheelchairs. "I did some research," he said. "Freedom Steps. You founded it 6 years ago?" "Co-founded," Diana corrected. "With my sister, Zoe. It's a dance-based rehabilitation program for children with physical disabilities." He nodded. "A program that's now closing due to lack of funding." Diana's expression didn't waver. "I didn't come here to ask for money." "Then why did you come?" "Because you invited me." He smirked slightly. "Fair enough." Then, unexpectedly, he said, "I want you to work for me." "As a waitress in your house?" "As a therapeutic companion for my son." Her eyes softened. "You already have the best specialist money can buy, don't you?" "I do," he said quietly. "But none of them made him smile like you did." Diana hesitated, seeing something raw beneath his polished exterior, desperation. "I'll pay you 5 times what you earn now." She stood. "No." Richard blinked, stunned. "You're turning down." "I don't work for people who see my color or my class before my competence," she said. "And your son doesn't need someone bought to care for him." She walked toward the door, then turned back. "Lucas doesn't need more experts. He needs space to lead. You don't know my son." "No," she agreed. "But I know cages, especially invisible ones." She placed a small card on his desk. "Freedom Steps. Classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you ever want to see what he's capable of, the first class is free." The following week, Diana was helping a child at a community center when her sister Zoe ran in, whispering excitedly, "There's a Bentley outside, and you won't believe who's in it." Through the window, Diana saw the luxury car. Inside, Lucas looked out nervously. His father sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly. "He's not coming in," Zoe predicted. "Men like that never do." "Don't underestimate a determined son," Diana murmured. Moments later, the car door opened. Lucas climbed out, then, unexpectedly, Richard followed. He looked uncomfortable, out of place in casual clothes that still screamed wealth. "I told you he'd come," Diana whispered with a knowing smile. Zoe stared at her. "What did you do?" Diana didn't answer. She just looked toward the entrance where father and son stood side by side. 2 people about to step into a world where money meant nothing, but courage meant everything. Because what Richard Montgomery didn't know was that Diana Johnson wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman with a mission, and the empire of privilege he had built was about to meet its greatest challenge. The warehouse that housed Freedom Steps looked nothing like the elite therapy centers Richard Montgomery usually funded. The walls were painted with bright murals, and the floors were covered in scuff with panels worn from years of movement. Handwritten posters read, "Your rhythm, your rules. Every move counts." When Richard and Lucas entered, the chatter of children filled the air. Kids in wheelchairs, walkers, and braces were dancing, some with their own beat, some with others. There was no uniformity, no symmetry, yet everything flowed with vibrant energy. "It looks chaotic," Richard muttered, folding his arms. "There's structure," Diana said, smiling, "just not the kind you recognize." Lucas was transfixed. He stared at a girl spinning her wheelchair in circles and a boy balancing on a prosthetic leg, his face glowing with pride. Diana knelt beside him. "Would you like to join?" Lucas hesitated, glancing back at his father. Richard nodded stiffly. "Go ahead. I'll be right here." As Lucas joined the group, Diana adjusted to his rhythm effortlessly, matching his pace the way she had in the restaurant. Zoe approached Richard, handing him a chair. The first day is always hardest, for the parents, not the kids. This isn't therapy, Richard said defensively. I've hired the best specialists. And how has that been working for Lucas? Zoe asked gently. Richard didn't reply. A new figure entered the studio, an older woman with gray braids and a cane carved with intricate patterns. The air seemed to shift when she walked in. Dr. Elaine Mercer, Zoe whispered. Neuroscientist, retired from Harvard. Dr. Mercer moved gracefully among the children, greeting each with warm familiarity. When she noticed Richard, her sharp eyes softened. Mr. Montgomery, we met, well, almost. You rejected my research proposal 3 times. Richard blinked. Dr. Mercer? I didn't realize you were part of this. I oversee the research program, she said evenly. We study how non-directive movement, letting children explore motion freely, affects brain reconfiguration. Richard frowned. Research? I thought this was a dance class. It's both, Diana said, joining them. Freedom Steps is a pilot rehabilitation model. We integrate adaptive dance with neuroscience. Movement autonomy builds neuroplasticity. Children relearn control when they're not being controlled. Richard studied her. Then why are you working as a waitress? Diana's expression didn't change. Because we don't have enough funding. And because people like you rejected us 3 times. Dr. Mercer smiled faintly. You were speaking to the co-author of those proposals, Mr. Montgomery. Diana's research is foundational. Richard's face hardened. You knew who I was that night. From the moment you walked into Kingsley's, Diana said softly. And when Lucas got up to dance, I recognized a chance to show, not tell. Was it staged? Absolutely not. Lucas chose to move. I chose to follow. Before Richard could respond, the door burst open. Reporters flooded the room, cameras flashing. Richard's composure shattered. What is this? Part 2 of the plan, Diana said quietly. Zoe handed him a newspaper. The headline read, Revolutionary Motor Rehabilitation Method shows promising results. Dr. Mercer spoke gently. We published our preliminary data this morning. The press is here for the demonstration. You used my son for publicity? Richard's voice was like ice. Diana met his gaze steadily. I used your attention to get you here. He turned away in fury, but then Zoe's voice broke through. Diana, it's Lucas. In the center of the room, Lucas was surrounded by silence. The music had stopped. He had removed one brace and was trying to balance. Trembling but determined. Lucas. Richard started forward. Wait, Diana whispered. Watch. The boy took a deep breath. His left leg wobbled, his arms outstretched. And then he stepped forward. One small, shaky, perfect step. The children cheered. Cameras clicked. Dr. Mercer smiled through tears. Richard's world tilted. He wasn't watching a patient or a project. He was watching his son be free. That's why we created Freedom Steps. Diana said quietly. It's not about perfect steps. It's about first ones. Richard turned to her, eyes wet. You manipulated me. I had to, she replied. You ignored our calls. You never read a single proposal. The reporters were closing in now, microphones raised. Richard looked from the flashing cameras to his son's glowing face. He could retreat in anger, or he could let the truth rewrite him. For a man who had built his life on control, humility was foreign territory. But in that instant he saw it. What Elizabeth had always meant by connection. He stepped forward. A reporter called out, Mr. Montgomery, is it true your foundation rejected this program 3 times? Richard took the microphone, his gaze fixed on Lucas. You know what's hardest for someone in my position? He said, voice low but clear. Admitting when we're wrong. A hush fell over the room. The Montgomery Foundation, he continued, is pledging a full 5-year funding commitment to Freedom Steps. We will build a permanent rehabilitation center based on Dr. Mercer and Ms. Johnson's work. Camera flashes exploded. Diana froze. What? On one condition, Richard added. looking at her. Ms. Johnson retained complete autonomy over the program. No corporate interference. The crowd erupted in applause. Zoe cried openly. Dr. Mercer beamed. Richard turned to Diana. You were right. Some steps can't be bought. They have to be followed. 3 months later, bulldozers tore through old concrete. The new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center began to rise, designed with input from children and families. No marble walls, no luxury trappings. Just accessibility, joy, and hope built into every detail. Richard visited often, usually in quiet observation. Sometimes Lucas came too, walking steadily on his lighter braces. Diana managed the site with steady resolve, clipboard in hand, purpose in her stride. I never thought you'd show up at board meetings, she teased one afternoon. I never thought I'd be reading neuroscience journals at 50, he replied, rubbing his eyes. But here we are. Still trying to compensate? He smiled faintly, still trying to learn. Lucas asked to remove his second brace, she said. I know. His doctor called it premature. And you? I fired her, he said simply, because she was wrong. Diana's lips curved upward. Good. You're learning. 6 months later, the Freedom Steps grand opening shimmered with light and music. Children of all abilities danced freely under a ceiling strung with paper stars. At the center stood Lucas, brace on one leg, cane in one hand, leading 3 younger children in a synchronized routine. Each step was imperfect, unpolished, yet beautiful beyond measure. Richard stood at the back, silent. Diana joined him. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore, she said softly. No, he replied, but he still needs me to be here. That's a crucial difference, she said, smiling. He turned to her, eyes warm. Thank you for teaching me to follow. A reporter approached. Mr. Montgomery, how does it feel to see your son's progress? Richard looked toward Lucas, who was now helping a little girl find her balance. Proud, he said, not what he's overcome, but of what he's creating for others. And the biggest lesson you've learned? The reporter asked. Richard Montgomery, the billionaire who once saw the world as a hierarchy of control, looked into the camera. That real leaders aren't the ones who lead, he said. They're the ones who have the courage to follow when someone shows them a better way. A year later, Freedom Steps expanded to 3 more cities. Diana received the Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award. Lucas enrolled in a regular school, sometimes using a cane, sometimes walking without one, and became a youth ambassador for children with disabilities. As for Richard Montgomery, he learned the most priceless lesson of all. True power isn't about controlling every step. It's about knowing when to step back and let someone else lead. And so, in a world obsessed with status and strength, the story of a waitress, a billionaire, and a boy with braces became a quiet revolution, a reminder that the most transformative changes don't come from money or power or prestige. They begin when one person dares to take a first, fragile step, and another finally learns to follow.